Hello everyone, welcome you all to Believers IAS Academy. In this today's topic of the day discussion, we will be discussing about what's happening in Afghanistan right now because of the earthquake that struck the country, and this is a very hard time for the nation, for the country, especially Afghanistan, as to how they are coping up with this kind of problem, and also not to ignore the number of people who lost their lives, and also in fact it is a movement for the country, especially India, to take away a few important things from what is currently going on, considering the fact that even India lies in the seismic active zones, especially the Himalayan belt region and also the Indo-Gangetic plain regions, which are seismically active even today, makes it very important for us to study about the earthquake and what made this earthquake so disastrous for Afghanistan, considering the fact that the earthquake which was recorded in the magnitude or in the Richter scale was just 6.0, which is considered to be a moderate earthquake. Of course, we're not disregarding what happened in Afghanistan, but statistically speaking, it was a 6.0, which was recorded on the Richter scale, which is considered as a moderate earthquake, but still the devastation or the consequence or the end result was very alarming, and in fact it has affected most of the region, and also it has exposed countries extreme vulnerability to seismic hazards. So this becomes absolutely important for India as well to understand the situation and take some key actives or takeaways from this ongoing issue. So even before we talk about the vulnerability of Afghanistan as to why this earthquake caused so much of disaster in the country, let's first understand what earthquake as a concept is. Of course, we will be going very brief. So earthquake, in simple terms, it is the sudden movement or the sudden vibration of the earth's crust due to the movements of tectonic plates within the earth's crust, right? And this sudden movement of the tectonic plates or various other elements which we will discuss when we study the types of earthquakes. So this sudden vibration released from within the crust of the earth also releases immense energy which comes out of the earth's crust, creating disasters. So what are the different types of earthquakes now? When we study the different types, the very first one is the tectonic earthquakes, and then the volcanic earthquakes. Third is artificial, or you can even call it human-made earthquakes. So these are the three different types of earthquakes depending on what causes the release of the energy or what causes the earthquake. So of course we have just discussed or understood the tectonic plates. Considering as to what happened in Afghanistan, it was majorly due to the collision of the Indian plate with the Eurasian plate. So now you might be wondering, especially beginners who do not know what these plates are. The entire world is divided into various plates, tectonic plates. And one of the plates that we are talking about here, so if considering this is India and this entire part is the Indian plate, which lies closely with the Eurasian plate. So all those countries which form or which are situated along the borders of these tectonic plates, especially when the plates collide, when the plates submerge, or when the plates move away from each other, the end result is an earthquake, one of the end result. And of course this is the same earthquake which we are talking about as the first type of earthquake, which is your tectonic earthquake. So one of the major reasons why Afghanistan region, because now if you see, Afghanistan is situated along the plates of the Eurasian and the Indian plates confluence, where these two plates meet. That is where Afghanistan is located, which makes it very conducive, which creates a conducive environment for the earthquake to happen. Any small minute changes with the tectonic plate movements, the end result is the earthquake. Next, followed by what is the volcanic earthquakes. These are those these are those earthquakes which are induced by the movement of volcanic eruptions, or even the movement of magma within the earth's crust, right? That induces the movement of the earth's crust, which is also called as the volcanic earthquakes. And famous example is all those earthquakes which we see in the Indonesia region, the Indonesian region, and also those earthquakes, especially in Japan, especially in the rings of fire, right? So that is classified as the volcanic earthquakes. And third category is the human-made earthquake, which is mostly due to human activities, like for example construction of dams, or let's say destruction of dams. Let's say a dam collapses, or building a huge water reservoir. Because of the collection of huge water in the reservoirs, it creates minute cracks along the beds of the river, right, making a sudden impact, which ultimately leads to volcanic eruptions. And also testing of certain nuclear plants, and even to some extent the construction of huge or let's say the use of huge explosives, some cases to get down few buildings, right, use of certain explosives. So all these are few of your human made examples of earthquake. So these are the broadly categorized types of the various types of earthquakes. Now earthquakes further is also classified as shallow and deep based on how the earthquake occurs, based on the intensity. We can classify the earthquake into two more categories. One is the shallow earthquakes, another one is the deep earthquakes. So if we consider this as the earth's crust, the point where the energy releases, the point where the earthquake, the energy starts, this is called as the focus. And the line exactly above the focus point on the surface of the earth, if this is the surface of the earth, this is called the epicenter. So this is one basic concept with respect to earthquakes. So depending on where the initial energy created, initial focus created, we classify the earthquakes into two different categories. So all those focus, or all those earthquakes which happens or which occurs due to the focus which created somewhere within the range of 70 kilometers, right, within or less than 70 kilometers. So this type of earthquakes, we call them shallow earthquakes. And anything beyond 70 kilometers, even up to 350 kilometers, we call them deep earthquakes. So the focus point, based on the shift of the focus point as to where the earthquake occurs, begins, we classify them as shallow and deep. And this also has to do with the intensity of the earthquake that comes in terms of the destruction that it creates, because generally the shallow earthquakes which originates or starts within the kilometers or within 70 kilometers of the earth's crust are considered to be very destructive. It is either very destructive, and also it is very localized. And one of the major reasons why the Afghanistan earthquakes were so devastating is because of its origin, which is just 8 kilometers from the earth's crust. The focus of the Afghanistan earthquake was somewhere within 7 to 8 kilometers of the earth crust, which is even more dangerous, right? So we have shallow, then we have something called as very shallow. Another category inside shallow, we have very shallow, which talks about those earthquakes which, or the focus point, which generates between 0 to 15 kilometers. And the one that struck the Afghanistan, the focal point was somewhere within 8 kilometers, meaning which this was highly localized and also highly destructive. So what is the reason? Now you have to simply understand that earthquake generally means a sudden movement of something, inside the earth's crust, and this movement releases energy. So depending on where this energy is released, let's say this energy is released, let's say this is somewhere around 10 kilometers, right? So the focal point was 10 kilometers beneath the earth, and if this is the focus and this is where the energy is released, the energy that gets released has very less distance to travel, and also it comes out even more aggressively and dangerously because it did not have sufficient time to travel so that it could release the energy and spread its impact. So hence the effect is highly localized, and since it is having very high energy, of course I'm using very simple words so that even beginners can understand this, and since the energy is also very high and it did not have sufficient time to release that energy, the near impact is that the earthquake is also very destructive. On the other hand, the same focal, let's say if it had originated 350 kilometers beneath the earth, and now the same energy or the same focal point, in order to, or let's say the energy to release, it has to travel a huge distance, by which the energy would have lost, and hence the spans would also be increased. So now these kind of deep earthquakes are usually not that destructive, but also another important thing is they cover a large area, right? So these are the two important things you have to keep in mind. One is the shallow earthquakes, another one is the deep earthquakes. Deep earthquakes generally they are not that destructive, but the area it covers is very large. On the other hand, the shallow earthquakes, the intensity is so high, it is highly localized, and also it is very destructive. So in case of Afghanistan, it was so destructive was because of the very reason where the focal of the earthquake originated or situated. So now I think it is pretty clear what an earthquake is, how an earthquake is formed, and also what is the role of the earthquake as to where it originates, right? So now we will understand why Afghanistan is so vulnerable. One is the tectonic location, which we already discussed, because of the location of the region, the Afghanistan region, on the congruence, or let's say on the confluence of the Eurasian plate and also the Indian plate, makes it a recipe, making it highly prone for earthquakes. Second, because of the shallow nature of the earthquake, many tremors here are shallow focus, means the area where Afghanistan is situated, many of such tremors is the energy, right? It's the energy with of the earthquake that we are talking about, releases intense energy close to the surface, amplifying the destruction we have discussed. Then weak infrastructure, also another major reason is the infrastructure of the country. It is because of the poor construction quality of the buildings, especially the infrastructure, lack of earthquake resistant buildings, and unplanned urban growth. Hence even the destruction coupled with the intensity of the earthquake coupled with the poor construction quality of the infrastructure increases the damage and the death tolls in that particular area. Then the remote mountainous terrain, the area or the region which is situated amongst the mountainous terrain, makes it difficult for the relief operations to also help the people who are affected, makes it even more difficult or worsens the situation and worsens the impact as well. So these are some of the reasons why Afghanistan as a region or as a country is so vulnerable. Now, can you not draw inferences from this? Because when we are talking about seismically active zones in India, one major thing, one is the Himalayan belt, the Himalayan region, especially the Himalayan belt, and we have the Indo-Gangetic region, Indo-Gangetic plains, which are highly seismic active. And in fact, if we see, all these points are also pretty much relatable to India scenario as well. So hence this becomes very important for India to also make sure that they take key takeaways from the situation so that they can work on it. And moving forward, key seismic hotspots. Which are those key seismic hotspots? One is the Hindu Kush region, which we already discussed right now, because from the India's perspective, the highly key seismic hotspots are, one is the Hindu Kush region, one of the world's most active seismic zones, and has witnessed 12 plus earthquakes above magnitude 7 since 1900. Then we have the Suleiman range, which is prone to destructive shallow thrust fault earthquakes. Always keep in mind, whenever you see the word shallow in earthquake concept, please keep in mind that it is very destructive, right? So especially in the Suleiman region, it is highly prone to the shallow earthquakes. Then is the fault lines, where the Chaman fault and the main Palmer thrust are constant sources of tectonic stress. So these are some of the important key seismic hotspots, which is important to the examination point of view to read, to understand. Then talking about the broader implications as to what are we taking out or what are we taking away from this particular incident. One is on the humanitarian basis. It's a humanitarian crisis. Thousands of people have lost their lives. In fact, hundreds have lost their lives, still counting. Thousands are displaced. Healthcare and relief systems are under extreme stress. In fact, the entire nation is struggling. In fact, they are silent, considering what has happened. The whole country is devastated. And the economic strain, right? The repeated disasters of these kind, which directly affects some critical infrastructure of any country. For example, healthcare, let's say hospitals of certain places, even let's say schools. If these kind of infrastructures are destroyed because of some natural calamities like this, becomes absolutely difficult for them to be reconstructed again, right? Because it is not something that you can build it over one night or 2 months for that matter. So, and also the end result of this, it even creates even more problem, considering that it affects the majority of the population, considering that these are affecting the basic needs of the people who are living in that country. So economic stress, even to make sure that to build those infrastructure once again, you need certain investment, and also not just that, but also you have to work on certain rehabilitation processes for the people who are affected, right? So obviously it creates economic stress for the country, especially rebuilding efforts of these infrastructure and development in an already fragile economy. And in Afghanistan case, I think it's pretty well known why. Then the geopolitical angle. So the limited international engagement with the Taliban government. Ever since Taliban formed the government in 2021, I think it's pretty evident as to how the relation, especially at the geopolitical level, is with Afghanistan, especially after when Taliban took over the government, which has complicated foreign aid and the disaster response also. So the sole blame is not just with the nature, not just to the nature who has, or let's say who's responsible for this earthquake, but also in a way it's the government also, because this is also very important for anything and everything that happens around the world, even for that matter investments, or even for that matter disasters, right? It completely boils down to the internal government or the governance of the country. So now just because the government is presently run by the Talibans, it becomes absolutely complicated even for foreign aids, right? Foreign aid, I hope you understand, any helping hand that other countries want to give, obviously considering the kind of government they have, it becomes very complicated, right? Even to go for such foreign aids or even to get some disaster relief for the country. Then is the future risks. High probability of stronger earthquakes in coming years demands urgent attention to disaster preparedness and resilient infrastructure. So this is pretty much like the way forward. As to greater implication is to understand the situation and try to know where we currently stand, work on the insecurities both at the government level and also at the let's say the infrastructure level, in terms of building resilience, in terms of creating awareness to the people, right? In terms of educating the people as to do what, especially when these kind of things happen. So all of these things are the part and parcel of the key takeaways that we have to understand. And in the end, we have to keep in mind that the country should actively invest in building earthquake resistant construction, especially in those areas which are seismically active, and disaster preparedness, right? Strengthen early warning systems, community training and rescue operations has to be intensified in terms of the disaster preparedness. And talking about the international support, collaborations with global agencies for technical expertise and funding, and also there has to be some indigenous seismic research in the country which can provide a detailed mapping of all the active fault lines to better predict and plan for high risk areas. Well, that is all for this video. I hope it is very clear what earthquake as a topic is. You've also understood what has happened in Afghanistan. Of course, deep condolences are definitely with all those who have lost their lives. Anyway, this is all for this particular video. I hope you have liked the video. If you have really liked it, please hit the like button. And for more such informative content, please do subscribe Believers IAS YouTube channel and stay tuned. We will be coming up with more such interesting videos. So until then, signing off, this is Madan Gopal. Have a beautiful day.